I was a lonely kid. I spent a lot of time alone in my room, and I didn't have many friends. And it didn't bother me, I just liked keeping to myself. But you know what I did have? The internet. I liked researching things and discovering games. I found out about EarthBound through Super Smash Bros. Brawl, a very underappreciated game, but that's a soapbox for another time. And I spent hours looking at all the trophies, and the fact that the Mother series had 2 different titles listed intrigued me, so I searched it up and boom, I was hooked on it. I joined Starman.net and made many friends who discovered the game in the same way I did. People who found this weird series and really connected with it ended up finding and really connecting with each other, so many of us hold these games very near and dear. EarthBound's sort of the quintessential cult classic game, isn't it? Well, yeah. But it shouldn't be. I don't think EarthBound warrants the term cult classic anymore. I mean, sure, in the 90s and early 2000s when it was a relatively unknown game with a relatively small fan base it was, but is it still a cult classic now? I don't think so. And this doesn't make EarthBound any less great, but people have a tendency to get protective of the things they love and that are perhaps lesser known, and likewise become protective of its image as a cult classic. First, let's set some ground rules, like what is a cult classic? A cult following is accepted to be a small but passionate fan base. Well, that's a big check for EarthBound. If it wasn't for the likes of Starman.net, a Mother series fan site, it's very likely there wouldn't be nearly as many people that know about it now. I mean, it's literally on the page for the term cult following. While EarthBound had a pretty small fan base then, I think we're getting pretty liberal with the term small nowadays. The game is one of the most active and devoted fan bases online of any video game. Sure, your average Joe might not know what EarthBound is, but anyone who's into video games has at least heard of it. It failed commercially in America decades ago, but now is routinely a bestseller every time it's re-released. In fact, its delayed reissues onto online systems now is likely so it doesn't step on the toes of other games being released. It's one of the most revered and acclaimed video games in history, and its influence is seen so much it's colloquially even become its own genre, but the ethics of that are also for another time. It's not underrated, it's up there with Final Fantasy VII and Chrono Trigger. It's not Chicken Little for the Game Boy Advance. Hate this game. And as for the fans being passionate, I mean, come on. What is a fan base if not dedicated? How many fans of a series don't like what they're a fan of? How is that even quantifiable? We're reaching levels of abstraction here that make the theory of relativity look like subtractive color theory, and I don't even know how either of those work. So yeah, by all terms and measures, EarthBound is not a cult classic anymore. So let's look at this from another angle. What makes something a classic? Well, you know all those things we defined as being what makes a cult classic? Well, it's sort of like that, but bigger. It's like my man Charles-Augustin Sainte-Beuve said in his essay Qu'est-ce qu'un classique, which is that the idea of a classic implies something that has continuance and consistence, and which produces unity and tradition, fashions and transmits itself, and endures. A true classic, he says, is an author who has enriched the human mind, increased its treasure, and caused it to advance a step, who has discovered some moral and not equivocal truth, or revealed some eternal passion in that heart where all seem known and discovered, who has expressed their thought, observation, or invention in no matter what form, only provided to be broad and great, refined and sensible, sane and beautiful in itself, who has spoken to all in their own peculiar style, a style which is found to be also that of the whole world, a style that's easily contemporary with all time. Bars. Now I know you're probably thinking, well, that encapsulates a lot of things. And you're right. I know this quote is referring to literature, but I think this works pretty widely and applies to a majority of art forms, and I think EarthBound more than fits into this definition. I really want to hone in on something else he said too. Ancient works are classical not because they are old, but because they are powerful, fresh, and healthy. But that's just one guy's interpretation. Let's look at another. Mark Twain once said, "A classic is something that everybody wants to have read and nobody wants to read." Need I say more? By the way, Mark Twain was hilarious. A classic is a piece that speaks to a wide array of people, regardless of when it's revisited. Universal themes like good and evil, love, friendship, these are things that have transcended both time and space for thousands of years. And EarthBound standing the test of time and still attracting new fans to this day is a testament to it speaking to these values and others like it. They're some of the most human things we have. And I think the sheer size of EarthBound's fanbase is such an important part to this conversation because these are the same reasons it stuck with fans when its appeal was much smaller all those years ago. It's like a baby. It's weird, but loving. And gross. But you know what? It's growing. So no, EarthBound isn't a cult classic anymore because it's transcended that. You know what it is? It's a classic. It's understandable that if something means a lot to you, obviously you'd want to protect it, and therefore your relationship with said thing. But I think many people have to recognize that just because something they loved when it was the underdog became one of the standard setters, doesn't make it any less valuable, and that goes both ways. As Mother fans, this attitude has been ingrained in us through decades of no acknowledgement and a dedicated underground culture, and I think a lot of us see parts of ourselves in a toy. When a toy approached Nintendo about creating an RPG game that was set in the modern day, he was laughed out of the room and cried on his train ride home. And despite this, he got it approved and worked tirelessly and completed it. And it became immensely commercially successful, critically acclaimed, and began one of the most influential game series ever created. But regardless of these things, he created them all out of his love for what he was creating. That's why it doesn't make sense to me when people say the series is dead. It's not dead. It's just complete. And yeah, there's all the factors that led to the game's initial international failure. The marketing, the period of no re-release, another 9 years for a second one, blah 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 blah. Emotional and cultural impact are not measured by critical or monetary success. They don't matter. At all. You know what a piece of art's success is measured by? You. It's measured by if it delivered you an experience you look back on and wish you could experience again. One that makes you feel sad that it comes to an end at all. One that makes you feel a weight in your heart that the places and people in it don't exist. These things are so incredible because they exist because somebody out there in the world exposed all of their insecurities, all their love, flaws, fears, and view of life because even though they don't know you, wanted for you to be happy. And that's an amazing thing. It's no secret we live in a pretty cold world. It makes me sort of glad I stayed inside so much as a kid. Because when you're out there, it sometimes seems like every single thing wants to tear you down. It's hard to get out of bed sometimes. Hell, a lot of the time. But experiencing things like this, something that reminds you not only of what you care about, but something about humanity, that's valuable. And no amount of money that thing made or how many people know about it will ever change that. You know how I know that? Because the amount of people who know and love this game has increased probably tenfold since I found it. And you know what? That fact will never make me enjoy it any less, because I'm happy more people know this game now. I'm happy that something I love means so much to so many more people. And I'm happy that so many love it for the same reasons I do. Because it lets me know something. I'm not alone.